Good afternoon and welcome to this, the second webinar in our NPIC series, Digital Pathology Innovation into Practice. And we've got a fantastic session lined up for you today on quality in digital histopathology. So hi, I'm Dr. Bethany Williams. I'm the lead for training and education at the National Pathology Imaging Cooperative, and I'm just going to be here to host today. And to introduce you to our excellent speakers. Now, I hope you've all had a great summer. We had a little pause in the webinar series just to allow for everyone to have a little bit of annual leave and enjoy the scorchingly hot British summer that we've had this year. But we're very pleased to welcome you all back to Yorkshire for this hour today for our next webinar. So as you may know, we sort of made it our personal mission over the last 5 years at Leeds and at NPIC to try and make digital pathology mainstream. So we've set out to try and answer some of the very fundamental questions that pathologists, biomedical scientists, IT professionals and laboratory managers might have about how to deploy digital pathology, particularly in clinical settings, safely and effectively. And we've gone out of our way to try and produce some easily accessible, pragmatic publications and events to help guide other departments in their digital journeys. So with this in mind, we're delighted to launch this webinar series, which we are providing for free. We are scheduling 8 events over the next 12 months. So we're now on event 2 out of 8, all taking this format of 1 hour of webinar with that always exciting opportunity to pose your questions in a Q&A session at the end. So there are lots and lots of exciting topics still to come in the series. We'll be circulating the details of the next event very shortly, and that's going to be centred around the role of the pathologist in digital pathology, and particularly looking at how the working life of the pathologist has changed with the introduction of digital reporting. So we are very, very excited to be able to continue this series, and we hope you're going to join us and continue to register for future events. In the meantime, whilst you're waiting for that next instalment, we do have our Leeds Guide to Digital Pathology still available. That was the original guide we wrote a few years ago now, that gives some starters and pointers on how digital. And more recently, we've published the next chapter, the Leeds Guide to Digital Pathology Volume 2, where you'll find lots more detailed information about topics like home reporting, multi-site use of digital pathology across a region or a national network, and some more information about artificial intelligence and patient and public involvement in digital pathology and AI-related projects. Without further ado, I would like to introduce our 2 excellent speakers for today. We have Professor David Brettel and Dr. Hayley Pye, who both work on the really innovative quality assurance and quality control work at the National Pathology Imaging Cooperative. So thank you. I'll hand over to David and Hayley now, and remember there will be opportunities for questions at the end, so please do pop your questions into the chat as we go along, and we'll try and address as many of those as we can at the end. Thank you.
It was once suggested to me that quality is not required in digital histopathology because the computers will sort it all out. My name is David Brettel. I'm the Chief Scientific Officer for Leeds Teaching Hospitals and the Quality Lead in NPIC, and I'm going to give a presentation that will hopefully convince you of the need for quality assurance in digital histopathology. NPIC stands for the National Pathology Imaging Cooperative. It is based in Leeds in the UK, and this is one of 5 UKRI funded Centres of Excellence in Digital Imaging and Artificial Intelligence. The aim is to build a national digital pathology system as a platform for the NHS, and there will be in excess of 30 hospitals using digital histopathology in the future, generating 3 petabytes of data per year. So histopathology has been around since the 1800s earlier. The process is that you would excise some tissue, prepare the tissue, section it, stain it, and then view it in the microscope. And then you can make the diagnosis. And guess what? In the 2020s, the same process. Excision, preparation, sectioning, staining, and viewing under the microscope, and then making the diagnosis. It hasn't changed much at all. So although things haven't changed, we now have digital as well. So we've got an extra layer on top of the previous process. We have the digitization layer and we have the display layer. But there's still variation in the imaging chain. And the important thing for me is that this is compounded, that each part can impact on the other part. And we've estimated these variations to be around 40% for the preparation of the sample, 10% in section thickness variation, 40% of staining variation, and who knows what the reporting variation is. I know in radiology there can be up to 20% variation between diagnoses. And then add on top of that the variation from digitization, let's say 10%, and also from display, and of course nobody really knows what the variation is in artificial intelligence. So start at the beginning, what is quality? The highest level in a quality management is the quality management system. This is a formalized process that documents what you do, how you do it, and who's responsible for what. And this is around achieving the quality policies and objectives. This is a management tool for delivering the quality system, and it is related to removing any defect. Within the quality system, of course, is quality assurance, and quality assurance is focused on confidence that the quality requirements are being fulfilled. How things are done and how a product is made or a process is delivered is important, and it's around defect prevention. And then we move to quality control. This is a subpart, again, of the quality assurance and focus on fulfilling the quality requirements. So this is around inspection to make sure we are doing what we said we would do. This is around detection of defects. So there are quality systems in digital histopathology. We have quality management systems for the laboratories. There is some select QA, but quality control is mainly subjective, particularly around the production of the slides. And then we move on to slide preparation, the digitization, and the AI, and there are definitely gaps in those processes. So why bother with quality? The NHS in the UK has a constitution, and a key component of this constitution is a commitment to quality of care. And through this, we earn the trust placed in us by insisting on quality and striving to get the basics right each time: safety, effectiveness, and experience. So we've taken this tenet, this premise, and we've applied this to the work we are doing in Leeds, looking at quality through the end-to-end process of digital histopathology. But specifically, I'm going to focus on 3 areas now that we've actually made quite a bit of achievement in and success. So the first of those is stain variation. So we've been addressing all areas of stain, but variation is one of the largest areas still. Current quality control is largely subjective. It's looking at slides and looking to see if they are as we would expect them to be. And anecdotally, local institutions are relatively tolerant of variation. People know what is normal for Friday, what is normal for a busy day, what is out of normal, and they can calibrate and adjust for those processes. It can still result in under or overstained slides. It can still result in restaining, recutting, and it can also result in wasted reagents by, for instance, changing when not needed, or actually leaving in too long, which again results in diluted reagents and therefore restaining. But with digital images, we lose that local context, and that tolerance, that ability to cope with variation that we all have in our local institutions is lost. And this is the issue for AI development. And this is an issue for AI development and portability. So we've been working on a solution to allow us to quantify stain. Of course, if we can quantify stain, we can start to apply standards and apply targets and thresholds. So the method we've chosen is to use a tissue mimicking biopolymer placed onto a glass slide. Ordinarily, this would be clear, unstained. We then place that through the stainer alongside the tissue in a normal carousel, and it is stained in the same way as the tissue would be. But because the biopolymer is of a known thickness, therefore, and has a linear response with respect to stain, we can look at the colour and we can actually quantify how much stain that quality slide got, and from that infer what the tissue got. This is a periodic quality control tool and could be used, for instance, several times a day. We have actually just completed a clinical trial with this tool, and using 8 different laboratories in the UK, and looking at the quantification of stain variation against tissue as well. This is a slide to show you the results of that trial, and you should be able to just make out some variation in those patches in the centre there. But importantly, if we look at this graph, we can see the variation between different laboratories, and say between laboratory 2 and laboratory 6, we can see there is quite a bit of difference. Those the colour in the centre of the patch is the mean intensity on the slides. And we can see there is about a 10% variation intra-lab, about 25% variation inter-lab. So relatively good within a laboratory, but between laboratories there can be quite a lot of variation. And as said before, now we can quantify this. We can start to apply targets, thresholds, and then standards. That will drive up the consistency, at least, of production of slides across all laboratories. Here's an example of using the same tool periodically during the day. This was stained at 5 times each day for 5 days. And we can see that on day 1 and 4, for instance, a typical pattern of stain behaviour, where during the day the reagents get diluted, they stain less well, and we can see that drops off towards the end of the day. Arguably, you may have chosen to change that stain midday. However, we look at, say, day 3 and day 2 and 5, they've got a relatively static profile. In fact, day 3, there's no variation at all, and we know that that day there was very few slides put through the staining system. Interestingly, day 5, there was an error on the setting up of the stainer, and the wash and other tanks are being swapped over. So we spotted that on the QA QC, and that could then be corrected. What's interesting, if you had a policy, say, of changing the stain each day, each morning, we could argue that you didn't need to change it for day 4 because it hadn't diluted over day 3. Yet on day 1 and 4 it should have been changed at midday. So stain variation, what impact does it have? Well, this is a piece of liver, and we looked at 3 regions on the liver, and we looked at these regions with an understained, a normally stained and an overstained samples. We then looked at the automated nuclear count on those regions, and you can see here over those 3 regions that there is a variation in cell count from the understained to the overstained, and relatively consistent between the different sections. But which is correct? What we found is, by using the Tango reference slide, remember this is an absolute reference point because it's an absolute thickness, we can actually correct to the stain variation and get consistency between understaining, non-staining and overstaining. So this is demonstrating that quantification of stain variation allows you to normalise an algorithmic analysis of an image. And this has been reported wider. The use of stain normalisation, segmentation, patch extraction increased the accuracy of computer-aided diagnosis by 19%. Stain normalisation allowed a remarkable improvement of the accuracy of more than 20%. So we can see here academics, researchers finding that stain variation impacts on algorithmic analysis of images and artificial intelligence. So another area that we're very interested in is display, and particularly display variation. The reason for this is very simple. In digital histopathology, the display is the link between the human and the digital data. It is not just a display like at home for watching television. It is an interface with the data. And this is what you can get with different displays. These are 8 different displays. All were set up the same as best we could. They were all photographed under the same photographic parameters and showing the same piece of tissue. And you can see there's a wide variation of presentation there. And again, go back to this is compounded on top of the stain variation, on top of sample variation, and on top of digitization variation. So this is a compounder on top. So there is a huge difference there between them. And again, the question I would ask you is which one of those is correct? The other issue with displays, of course, is that they are affected by the environment that they are in. These slides, these images show a quality control tool that we have developed called the point of use QA. And the point of use QA is a challenge response test that presents you with letters. You have to repeat the letters. If you can see them, then you know that that monitor is working at a minimum level of performance, which is set around 1 delta E in the case of this test here. Top left, you can see a darkened room, and you can hopefully see all the letters. You can probably see F, W, N, and T. If we turn the room lights on, I think you'll probably start to see that the T is harder to see. Then if we turn on the desk lamp, you'll start to see all the letters are hard to see. And if we open the curtains, we can see a structured pattern of light on top of the ambient light, making it really difficult to see. And I would argue the darkened room is demonstrably the best option for viewing images on a display. So if you want to test the display that you're looking at now, just look at these 4 squares and see if you can repeat them. And if you want to do this for real, you can go onto the virtualpathology.leeds-th.tr.npic website, and you will find this test is available for anybody to use, particularly for home reporting and to validate your display. So what you should be seeing is K, X, R, and V going from left to right. We have looked at a range of different displays in an NHS hospital. This is just a convenient sample of what was there, and we can see the response is a percentage correct graph showing how many times we could get the letters correct for different levels of colour level. So a colour level of 0 was can't see, and the colour level of 8 should have been very obvious. And we can see that on the old NHS desktop, you can't see 100% of the letters, even when they have a really high contrast. However, the opposite, of course, is if you get a medical grade display, you can see pretty much 100% all the way across the range. Interestingly, the university desktops, they must have more money than we have, are much better than the NHS displays, even the new ones. But this just illustrates very nicely the importance of the display and the importance of picking the right display and the impact on your ability to perceive that data as presented on it. And we've used this test, like I say, it was made available for home reporting because of COVID, to help home reporting. And these figures are a little out of date now, but in theory, the average, it works out at about 11% of people who do this test fail, and they can't see all of those letters. Arguably, they can't see a minimum level of threshold of colour across the range clinically used, and arguably should not be used. So the other area of work and activity has been around scanner colour variation. We worked with a company called FFEI, and they developed a tool that uses a biopolymer stained real stains to allow you to characterise the digitizer and its colour response. And you can see the image on the left is the Sierra slide, is its name. You can see on Sierra it covers the full range of stain possibilities. Importantly, these are real stains, so they get around some of the challenges of colour and its how it is perceived in different lights, because it has it is genuinely stained tissue, biopolymer. And we can see here the potential impact. The uncalibrated image is on the left, and if you apply the characterized correction curve, the color ICC color profile, you can see that you can correct to a better presentation, arguably. Now, we did test this by doing a preference study, and in this preference study we have shown that when looking at the uncalibrated and the calibrated compared to the microscope, there is a overwhelming preference of the calibrated image because of its similarity to the microscope. So we can show here that the Sierra slide allows you to get back to the microscope and the correct, if that is the right word, but certainly the historically correct reference level. So in summary, quality is important to digital histopathology, and this is becoming increasingly, people are becoming increasingly aware of this, especially over the impact on AI algorithms and its portability. We're developing several tools to address all of these, and indeed we have new tools to look at other areas independently. Stain variation is one of the hardest to quantify, and we believe we have a way to do this now, and we have obviously, we're trying to pursue this as well commercially. And we have proven that quality control can be manufactured today, and we can use this to improve our data set moving forward. Thank you for listening to this presentation. I'm now going to hand over to my colleague, Hayley Pye, who is going to present how this work links to other activity we've been involved with.
Thank you, David. Hi, everyone. My name's Hayley Pye, and I work with David Brettel in NPIC, working on all of those wonderful things he's just shown you, all of that amazing quality control and quality assurance work that he's spearheaded at NPIC, and about how that applies to another project that we're involved in. So that project is Big Picture. So Big Picture is a European repository of digital pathology images, and its aim is to boost the development of AI. There's 45 partners across 15 countries with significant investment from IMI. It started in February 2021 and it's due to last 6 years. In the end, we want to have 3 million slides in a functional, trustworthy, valuable and sustainable platform. They're doing a lot of work to try and make sure it's ethically and GDPR compliant, and across 15 countries in the EU, that's no easy task. You can find out more at the website, and there's also a paper that's been published. There's a large community of us, and it spans all the sorts of people who are involved in digital pathology research. And these are some of the logos of some of the people who are currently involved. So how does NPIC relate to Big Picture? So we have multiple roles within Big Picture, but the one I'm going to talk to you today is establishing the Big Picture Quality Coordination Center. So our aims are here. So firstly, we want to understand the landscape of whole slide imaging quality across the whole Big Picture network. Who's doing what are they using, what guidelines are they using to make sure their slides are of a high quality? And importantly, what variability can we measure across this network? We want to understand and map it across the whole Big Picture project. We're also going to disseminate information across the network to raise awareness and create a really good culture of quality. And in time, we hope to establish recommended minimum levels of QA from that landscape. So the first thing is who's doing what? Where do we start? So we're in our first year, and I'm going to now present some of the work we carried out to address this aim here. So during the first year of the project, we did an anonymous survey. It was sent to all members of the Big Picture Consortium who've registered for the annual quality workshop in year one. Our aim is to just get a baseline quality assessment of Big Picture labs via a structured questionnaire. And we asked 5 very high-level questions about quality checks and processes over various stages of the whole workflow. So these are the 7 stages as we split the whole workflow up. So we've got pre-staining, staining, scanning, post-scan, which is things like inspecting the image, preparing it for storage, and then we've got digital reporting and display, combining the metadata in the image, which we've made its own separate piece, and then computational and AI, including preparation for CA work. Okay, so these are the 5 questions. Are quality checks and processes carried out? Do they have defined standards that they need to meet? Are they outlined in a managed document? For example, you might use it in a quality management system. Are these mandatory and do they need to be followed? And are records of the rate of compliance kept? So these are just questions to try and tease out sort of what level, or if at all, that they're carrying out quality checks and processes. And they could answer yes to all steps, yes to some, no, unsure, or not applicable. So this is the data. Now, it was an anonymous survey, and we allowed centres to opt out of any of the 7 stages because some of them might not be doing those steps. And at the bottom, we collected demographics loosely. So we can see that actually all of the stages do represent all of these different groups that are in big picture. So some of the key findings from this work are that at least 60% of all centres applied some quality checks or processes at every stage of the workflow. The 4 stages at the beginning of the workflow, so pre-staining, staining, scanning and post-scan, 100% of centres reported they apply quality checks or processes to some or all steps. For pre-staining and staining, these were high quality checks. They also said they had those defined standards. They were outlined in a document. They had records of compliance. For scanning and post-scan, this still existed and it was quite at a high level, but it was reduced to 72%. For the later 3 stages though, so digital reporting and display, reporting of metadata and computational analysis and NI, the proportion of centres reporting a complete absence of quality checks or processes was 40%, 14% and 17% respectively. So if you work within a quality system, it's really important that you carry out educational work as well as listen to the people in that quality system. So we carried out 2 educational engagement pieces in our first year, one to members of the Big Picture Consortium and one to a much wider audience of potential slide contributors. So there was a presentation on things that matter for quality for digital pathology, and then we actually asked the contributors their opinion. And we asked them to provide their agreement on various statements about quality assurance and quality checks. So this is that data. So our findings from this were that over 95% of contributors agree or strongly agree that QA in general is important. Great. But this proportion, interestingly, decreased as the workflow steps progressed. You can kind of see a nice stepping on the image there. So, for example, 85% of people thought that variation introduced by sample prep was important. When you got to stain variations was 78, and then 64 for digitizer, and then down to 55 for display variation. So interestingly, around half of the contributors currently think that AI can overcome variation in the digital datasets. But there's still quite a large remaining half, and they're distributed between being unsure or not thinking that it can. We also asked them to rank the different stages of the workflow for their importance to QA. And sample preparation came first, and display came last. So in summary, this data provides an important insight into whole slide imaging quality and the challenges to implement end-to-end quality assurance. Our results showed that the proportion of laboratories implementing high-quality checks and processes was lower towards the later stages of the pathway. The opinion data suggested that the variation that's occurring earlier in the workflow, however, was thought to be more important. So this could suggest we don't need to do anything towards the end of the pathway, but it could also suggest that it's the knowledge of quality processes in these digitization steps that's lacking. And it could suggest a need for the development and implementation of the processes themselves at this point, as well as a bit more education in this space. So I didn't collect this data alone. We had loads of support, including some of the people mentioned here, and additional thanks go to the much wider NPIC team, who are fabulous. I'm going to hand back over to David now.
So thank you for listening to our presentations this afternoon. I think they answer, for us anyway, the question of whether quality is important in digital histopathology. If you'd like to contact us, our emails are on the screen. We're very happy to discuss quality with you. And again, thank you for joining us this afternoon.